There are several different social theories of aging. Socio-emotional selectivity theory states that older adults become more selective about their social networks and often seek greater emotional quality in friends and family relationships. The disengagement theory tells you that to cope effectively, older adults should gradually withdraw from society. This was the prevailing belief in the first half of the 20th century. The activity theory: the more active and involved older adults are, the more likely that they will be satisfied with their lives. It is suggested that for a greater life satisfaction, older adults should continue their middle adulthood roles or find substitutes when it's not possible to do so. So researchers have found very much support for the activity theory. So the disengagement theory is no longer relevant. It was historically relevant, but now it's not so accurate. So now, because the older people are much more active, then they are living a more satisfying life. Ageism. That's one of the biggest stereotypes for older adults. Ageism is a prejudice against others because of their age, especially prejudice against older adults. Often inhumane but real perceptions of the older adult exist in our youth-oriented society, and unfortunately, these attitudes may be held by their adult children. Ageism is widespread. The most frequent form is disrespect for older adults, followed by assumptions about ailments or feeling as if they are frail just because they're older. The increasing number of adults living to older ages has led to active efforts to improve society's image of older adults, obtain better living conditions for older adults, and gain political clout to address issues involving this group. When we say successful aging, we're talking about what a person can do to ensure that they will improve with age, just like fine wine. So they need to have a proper diet, an active lifestyle, mental stimulation and flexibility. They need to have positive coping skills, good social relationships, support through friends and family, and absence of disease. Culture refers to the behavior, patterns, beliefs, and all other products of a particular group of people that are passed on from generation to generation. Cross-cultural studies compare aspects of two or more studies. The concept of culture is definitely a broad one, and it includes many components that can be analyzed in many different ways. There are a number of distinct characteristics of a culture. So a culture is made up of ideals, values, and assumptions about life that guide people's behavior. It consists of those aspects of the environment that people make. Culture is transmitted from generation to generation. And when cultural values are violated or their cultural expectations are ignored, people react emotionally. Now I also have on this screen the term ethnocentrism. That is the tendency to favor one's own group over another's group. Now, I guess the question is culture relevant when we're talking about lifespan development? And the answer is yes, it is. So individualism refers to giving priority to personal goals rather than group goals, and it emphasizes values that serve the self, such as feeling good, personal achievements, independence. All of those things fall under individualism. When you're talking about collectivism, then you're emphasizing values that serve the group by subordinating personal goals to preserve group integrity, interdependence of the members, and harmonious relationships. Many assumptions of contemporary ideas in lifespan development were developed in individualistic cultures. Critics argue that terms like individualism and collectivism are too broad and simplistic, especially with the increased globalization. So here is a chart that breaks down the differences between individualistic and collectivistic. So one focus on the individual, one focuses on groups. The private self is more important if you're individualistic, as opposed to the public self being more important. Emotions such as anger are well focused if you are individualistic, and if you are collectivistic, then your emotions such as anger are often relationship based. Okay, so with individualism, you have many casual relationships. Collectivism, you have few close relationships. Okay, so there are some differences here, and there are things to take note of so you can see, where you fall in. Okay, self-conceptions vary according to culture. So there's a focus on your personal traits versus your group affiliations. There's also problems in Western culture that are intensified by individualistic values. And those things are the negative behaviors, such as suicide, drug abuse, crime, teen pregnancy, divorce, child abuse, mental disorders. They're all higher in those countries that consider themselves individualistic. Now, sociocultural influences, I guess one of the greatest ones would be media and screen time. So it could be television, video games, media screen time. I'm trying to figure out what else would actually fall into that. I think that's pretty much the only categories. So with socio-cultural influences, one is, as I said, the effects of media and screen time, and that depends on what the child's age is and the type of media that we're talking about. So whether it be the video games or the television or the cell phone, any type of screen time affects people differently. Preschool children can learn from media with educational material, so it can be used as an effective strategy if it's used properly, and if images and sounds used that can attract young children's attention. And it also can be helpful if children's voices are used rather than adult voices. Now, as the children get a little older, there are many more concerns about, technology and the digital communication. So children and adolescents have access to all of that information on the internet. The main problem is that media is largely unregulated. So parents definitely need to monitor and regulate the adolescents' use of the internet. Then you've got the internet with the aging adults. Internet does play a role in providing access to information and communication for adults. Now, older adults are less likely to have a computer and less likely to use internet. Now, hopefully that's changing a bit because it's not as scary as it was because it's been around for a little bit longer. So the use of internet to search for health information and email to communicate with relatives is pretty much what they're using it for. They're not often out on, Instagram or on TikTok or anything like that. Frequent computer use related to high cognitive performance. So basically, one of the things that we were saying earlier is that as you get older, you've got to keep your mind fresh. And by using a computer and learning how to use it and all of its different purposes, that actually can help increase the cognitive development. So this has pretty much highlighted all of the important points of this chapter. The only other thing that I wanted to bring attention to is that there is a section in this chapter on socioeconomic status and poverty. It asks you what socioeconomic status is, which is abbreviated as SES, and that refers to the grouping of people with similar occupational, educational, and economic characteristics. So take a look at that portion of the chapter where it talks about what socioeconomic status is, how it varies in neighborhoods and families, and then it quotes poverty rates from 2014. What I would do is just Google what the poverty rate is now in 2019, because those figures should be in. And you'll see that there is a vast difference from what it was. It's actually gone down. Well, I guess I should say it's gone up. There's a higher rate of poverty now than what there was in 2014. And then the other thing that it does talk about is feminization of poverty. Now that's a term that I had never heard before going to a sociology class. So I'd never heard it in lifespan development before. And this one refers to the fact that far more women than men live in poverty. So there are many more female-headed households that live in poverty compared to married households that live in poverty. Now that's probably not a surprise because most single family homes, and this of course is a general statement, live in poverty. The reasons include the lower pay, the infrequent alimony payments, and poorly enforced child support. So because of those three things, it's much more difficult for a female-headed household to live in an area other than a poverty-stricken area. So take a look at that part in the chapter because there are some interesting facts in there.